Millionaire finds black nanny protecting his mother with Alzheimer's. And he's shocked. The crystal chandelier in the Peterson estate shook as another crash came from upstairs. Daniel Peterson stood frozen in his marble foyer, his heart pounding as he heard his mother's frightened voice crying out. He had just returned early from his business trip to Singapore, hoping to surprise his family. But what he was hearing made his blood run cold. The 78-year-old woman who had raised him with nothing but love was sobbing like a scared child. Daniel dropped his expensive leather briefcase and rushed toward the staircase, but stopped when he heard another voice. It was his younger brother Michael's wife, Sandra, and her words cut through the air like poison. "Stop crying, you pathetic old fool. Nobody wants you here anymore. You can't even remember your own son's name half the time." Sandra's voice was filled with hatred that Daniel had never heard before. Through the slightly open door of his mother's room, he could see Sandra gripping Eleanor Peterson's thin shoulders, shaking her roughly. His mother, once the strongest woman he knew, looked small and helpless in her flowered nightgown. The Alzheimers had taken much from Eleanor, but Daniel had trusted his family to care for her with dignity. Now he was seeing a nightmare unfold. His mother whimpered, trying to pull away from Sandra's harsh grip. "Please, I don't understand. Where is my Daniel? I want my son." Sandra laughed cruelly. "Your precious Daniel doesn't care about you. He left you here with us because he can't stand looking at what you've become." That's when Daniel noticed someone else in the room. Standing near the window was Grace Thompson, the new caregiver they had hired just 3 weeks ago. The 42-year-old woman was watching everything with careful eyes, her dark hands steady as she held her phone behind her back. Grace had come highly recommended from the agency, but Daniel had barely spent time getting to know her before his business trip. Now he watched as she moved slowly closer to his mother, her face showing both anger and careful planning. Grace had grown up in Detroit, raised by her aunt who had also suffered from dementia. She knew the signs of elder abuse better than anyone. Her own aunt had been mistreated in a care facility before Grace fought to bring her home. That experience had led her to become a caregiver, determined to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "Mrs. Sandra," Grace said in a calm but firm voice, stepping between Sandra and Eleanor. "I think Mrs. Peterson needs her afternoon medication now. Perhaps you should take a break." Sandra's face twisted with rage at being interrupted. "Don't you dare tell me what to do in my own house. You're just the help. You work for us, remember?" Grace didn't back down, her brown eyes meeting Sandra's cold stare without flinching. "Actually, I work for Mr. Daniel Peterson. My job is to ensure his mother's safety and well-being. Right now, you're preventing me from doing that job." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eleanor reached out her trembling hand toward Grace, finding comfort in the caregiver's presence. "Grace, dear, is that you? You came back for me?" Grace gently took Eleanor's hand, never breaking eye contact with Sandra. "Yes, Mrs. Eleanor. I'm here. I'll always be here when you need me." Sandra's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're getting too comfortable here, aren't you? Maybe it's time we found someone else who knows their place better." But Grace had been recording everything on her phone for the past 10 minutes. Every cruel word, every rough touch, every moment of abuse was now documented. She had learned long ago that evidence was more powerful than accusations. In her pocket, she also had a small notebook where she had been documenting Sandra's behavior since day one. The prescription medications that went missing, the bruises that appeared on Eleanor's arms, the time Sandra had locked Eleanor in her room for hours without food or water. Everything was carefully recorded with dates and times. Daniel couldn't stand still any longer. He walked into the room, his face dark with controlled fury. "What's going on here?" His voice was deadly quiet, but everyone in the room felt its power. Sandra's face went white as snow. She immediately changed her entire demeanor, becoming sweet and concerned. "Daniel! You're home early. I was just trying to help Mother Eleanor with her confusion. She's been having such a difficult day. Daniel looked at his mother, who was now clinging to Grace's hand like a lifeline. Then he looked at Grace, who met his gaze steadily. In that moment, he saw the truth in her eyes. "Grace," he said slowly, "has my mother been having many difficult days lately?" Grace chose her words carefully. "Mr. Peterson, your mother has good days and bad days with her condition. But some days have been made unnecessarily harder by certain circumstances." She emphasized the last words, making sure Daniel understood. Sandra tried to interrupt. "She's lying. This woman has been filling your mother's head with nonsense, trying to turn her against the family. I think she's after your money." But Daniel had already seen enough. The fear in his mother's eyes, the protective way Grace stood between them, and most importantly, the guilty panic on Sandra's face told him everything. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed home, watching carefully. What he discovered broke his heart into a million pieces. Sandra had been systematically abusing his mother for months. Maybe longer. She would hide Eleanor's favorite things and blame her forgetfulness. She would give her the wrong medications to make her more confused. She would tell her terrible lies about how her family had abandoned her. And through it all, Grace had been there, quietly protecting Eleanor as much as she could while gathering evidence. Daniel found Grace one evening giving his mother a gentle bath, singing soft hymns that seemed to calm Eleanor's anxiety. "How long has this been going on?" he asked quietly. Grace didn't stop her gentle care of Eleanor as she answered. "I've been documenting incidents since my first week here, Mr. Peterson. But from what your mother has told me during her clear moments, and from what other staff members have hinted at, I believe it's been happening for at least 6 months. Daniel felt sick to his stomach. 6 months of his mother suffering while he was building his empire, trusting that his family would care for her. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? Grace finally looked at him, and he saw years of wisdom in her eyes. "Mr. Peterson, I've been a caregiver for 15 years. I've seen this too many times. Family members don't want to believe their loved ones capable of such cruelty. Staff members are afraid of losing their jobs. And victims like your mother are often too confused or scared to speak up. I needed solid proof before I could act." She pulled out her phone and showed him video after video, recording after recording. Sandra screaming at Eleanor, pushing her, denying her food, even stealing money from Eleanor's purse and jewelry box. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Daniel's hands shook as he watched his mother being tortured by someone he had welcomed into his family. "My brother, does Michael know?" Grace shook her head slowly. "I believe Mrs. Sandra has been very careful to hide this from him. She only acts this way when she knows no one else is around. Except she didn't count on me." That night, Daniel called his lawyer and the police. He also called Michael, who rushed over immediately. When Michael saw the evidence, he broke down completely. He had been working long hours at the hospital as a surgeon, trusting his wife to care for his mother-in-law. The betrayal cut deep into both brothers. Sandra was arrested the next morning. She screamed and fought, claiming it was all lies, that Grace had fabricated everything. But the evidence was too strong. Videos, photos, medical records showing suspicious injuries, and testimony from other staff members who had been too scared to speak up before all painted a clear picture of systematic elder abuse. During the legal proceedings, Grace's background came to light in a way that surprised everyone. She wasn't just a caregiver with a high school diploma. She had a bachelor's degree in social work and had been studying law part-time for 3 years. She knew exactly what evidence was needed, how to document it properly, and what laws Sandra had broken. "You could have been anything," Daniel said to her one day as they waited outside the courtroom. "Why choose to be a caregiver?" Grace smiled softly. "Mr. Peterson, I am exactly what I chose to be. Someone who protects those who can't protect themselves. My aunt died alone and afraid in a place that was supposed to care for her. I couldn't save her, but I can save others. Your mother, she reminds me so much of my aunt. Same spirit, same gentle heart, same vulnerability that predators try to exploit. The trial was swift. Sandra was sentenced to 5 years in prison for elder abuse, theft, and assault. She lost everything, including her marriage to Michael, who couldn't forgive her for what she had done to his mother. But the real victory wasn't in Sandra's punishment. It was in Eleanor's recovery. Free from the constant fear and abuse, with proper medication and graces. Gentle care, Eleanor began to have more good days. She couldn't recover from Alzheimer's, but she could live with dignity and peace. Daniel transformed his entire life after this experience. He cut his business travel by 70%, choosing to spend more time with his mother. He also started a foundation for elder abuse prevention, with Grace as the director. Together, they created training programs for caregivers and family members, teaching them how to recognize and report abuse. Grace's role evolved from caregiver to advocate, though she still spent every morning with Eleanor, their bond now unbreakable. "You saved her," Daniel told Grace one afternoon as they watched Eleanor painting in the garden, a hobby she had rediscovered thanks to Grace's patient encouragement. "No, Mr. Peterson," Grace replied. "I just did what anyone with eyes to see and a heart to care should do." The real tragedy is how many elderly people suffer in silence with no one to stand up for them. Eleanor, having one of her clear moments, reached for both their hands. "My angels," she said softly. "God sent me 2 angels." The investigation that followed Sandra's arrest revealed she had done this before. 2 previous elderly employees had accused her of theft and abuse, but the cases had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. Grace's meticulous documentation had finally stopped a serial abuser. Michael, devastated by his wife's actions, dedicated himself to making amends. He reduced his hours at the hospital and spent every weekend with his mother, learning from Grace how to provide proper care for someone with Alzheimer's. The brothers grew closer through their shared pain and determination to protect their mother. The Peterson estate, once a place of hidden suffering, became a model for compassionate elder care. Daniel hired only caregivers trained in Grace's programs, and he installed cameras not to spy but to ensure accountability and protection for everyone. Grace's influence extended far beyond the Peterson family. Her testimony in Sandra's trial led to 3 new state laws protecting elderly people with dementia from family abuse. She was invited to speak at medical conferences, sharing her knowledge with doctors, nurses, and social workers. But she never forgot where she came from or why she did this work. Every morning, she still helped Eleanor get dressed, still sang those same hymns, still provided the gentle care that had first caught Daniel's attention. Eleanor might not always remember Grace's name, but she always remembered the feeling of safety Grace brought with her. 1 year after Sandra's conviction, Daniel found Grace in the garden with his mother. Eleanor was laughing at something Grace had said, her eyes bright with joy. It was a sound he hadn't heard in so long that it brought tears to his eyes. "Grace," he said, approaching them. "I've been thinking. The foundation needs a president, someone with your knowledge and passion. The position comes with a law school scholarship if you're interested in finishing your degree." Grace looked at Eleanor, who was humming happily. "What about Mrs. Eleanor? I can't leave her." Daniel smiled. "You wouldn't have to. Part of the job would be overseeing her care team. She needs you, Grace. We all do." Grace accepted, but with conditions. She would continue Eleanor's direct care in the mornings, and she would use her position to ensure no elderly person in their community suffered in silence. Within 2 years, the Peterson Foundation had helped prosecute 30 cases of elder abuse and had trained over 500 caregivers. Eleanor passed away peacefully 3 years later, holding Grace's hand, surrounded by her sons and the team of caregivers who had become like family. At her funeral, Grace spoke about the woman Eleanor had been, not just in her final years, but throughout her life. A teacher, a mother, a friend, a human being deserving of dignity until her last breath. Sandra, still in prison, was not allowed to attend. Daniel never remarried, dedicating his life to his mother's memory and the foundation's work. But he found a different kind of partnership with Grace, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Together, they transformed tragedy into triumph, making sure Eleanor's suffering led to protection for countless others. Grace Thompson proved that heroes don't always wear capes or carry weapons. Sometimes they wear scrubs, carry notebooks, and possess the quiet courage to stand between the vulnerable and those who would harm them. Her vigilance had saved not just Eleanor, but had created a legacy of protection that would last for generations. The Peterson estate now hosts monthly support groups for families dealing with Alzheimer's, all led by Grace. The walls that once held secrets and suffering now echo with hope and healing. And in the garden where Eleanor spent her final peaceful years, a plaque reads, "In memory of Eleanor Peterson, whose strength and vulnerability inspired a movement." And in honor of Grace Thompson, who showed us that true power lies not in wealth or position, but in the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The story of the millionaire who found a black nanny protecting his mother became legend in their community, but for Grace, it was never about recognition. It was about a promise she had made to her own aunt years ago, that she would never let another elderly person suffer alone and afraid. It was a promise she kept every single day. Daniel Peterson learned that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. And Grace Thompson taught him that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the millionaire, but the one with the courage to speak for those who have no voice. Their story reminds us that abuse thrives in silence and darkness, but cannot survive when faced with documentation, determination, and the unwavering dedication of someone who simply refuses to look away. In the end, Grace didn't just save Eleanor Peterson. She saved an entire family from the poison of hidden abuse and showed them what true care really looks like.